Hello, and welcome back to Go With The Flow. I'm your host, Shannon, and today I'm joined by a few of our Writing Center mentors as well as one of our Writing Center directors. I'd like us to go around and introduce ourselves or reintroduce ourselves for those of us who have already been on, for our listeners who are joining us for the very first time. I'll go first. As I said, my name is Shannon. I am a junior here at Lewis. I'm an English and secondary education major, and this is my fourth semester working in the Writing Center. Chris, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Chris. I am a physics master's student, and this is my third semester working at the Writing Center.
Ava?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ava. I am a junior. I'm a music industry student, and I think this is my fourth semester with the Writing Center.
And Jasmine.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Castillo. I'm the assistant director of the Writing Center, and I have taught first-year writing classes here since 2014. My background is in teaching writing and in teaching English to speakers of other languages. I graduated from Lewis as an English major and went to DePaul, where I concentrated in writing, rhetoric, and discourse. So I've been teaching ESL classes here at Lewis for the last several years.
All right, awesome. So we know that many students at Lewis speak more than one language and come from all over the world. Today we're talking about how the Writing Center supports multilingual and international English writers by offering strategies for challenges like grammar, clarity, and academic expectations. So for our first segment, we're going to be talking about how we can celebrate multilingualism. So Jasmine, I'm going to start with you. So what strengths do multilingual students bring to their writing?
So a lot of things. One is that they offer multiple perspectives using their language experiences and their backgrounds. I just talked to my students about this today, actually, and they themselves feel that way. Also, depending on how they learn their second language, some students might be particularly good at grammar. Other students might have a really good grasp of what their second language sounds like and how certain phrases are used and in which contexts. I always share that it's something that should be celebrated because it's a really interesting perspective to share.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you can speak multiple languages and you have like that additional cultural experience, I do think it can bring a lot to your writing and overall make it more interesting. So, Chris, how might you think thinking in multiple languages can enrich like academic writing and creativity?
Okay, well, thinking in multiple languages or even knowing multiple languages is an academic achievement in and of itself. It sort of forces you to think in multiple different ways from whatever your original language is. So naturally, that's going to give you a bit more adaptability as opposed to someone who doesn't know like any other different languages, if that makes sense. I'd say that it just brings a different perspective to the table, and you naturally have like different cultures and things like that, which ultimately will feed into your creativity by giving you those different perspectives.
Yeah, like I said before, I think it can like bring a lot to your writing and also everything else that you do like throughout your academic career and then further into your real life career. Like being multilingual opens so many doors for you, and I just think like it's a really great trait to have and to also embrace. So Ava, I want you to maybe share like an experience you've had with a multilingual writer that maybe helped you to become like a better tutor or opened like new perspectives to you.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I've worked with a lot of students that speak different languages. I've worked with students that speak Spanish. I've worked with students where their first language is Arabic or another language besides English. And once I hear that they are multilingual and that maybe English is their second language, it does help me to look at their paper from a different angle, just because I don't want to be as necessarily picky or like as anal as I would be with a student that speaks English and has been going through like English learning, like ELA, throughout middle school and high school and now in college. but it definitely helps me understand how they write and how they organize their thoughts, because it is different and there are some phrases that don't exist in English or the other way around that don't exist in their language. So that is a challenge that I've helped students through before. If they're trying to think of something and they only know how to say it in their language, I'll try to help them figure out how they can translate that as best as possible. But I think that it's definitely helped me become a more well-rounded tutor, just because I sort of have that experience working with bilingual students. And if I do come across them in the future, I kind of have a basis of how to go about the appointment and how to help them if they're struggling with like translanguaging type issues in their writing.
Well said. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think when I first started working with multilingual writers, I think maybe I was somewhat intimidated because I felt as if I did not qualify to help these students. But after having some experience working with students who speak multiple languages, I feel much more comfortable, and I feel like I can definitely like better help a lot of students that I see. And that includes students who only speak English because of my experience with teaching students who might struggle or who, like you said, might not know how to say certain things in English because it doesn't translate like perfectly. So next, we're going to move on to talking about some common challenges that students might have when they first start writing academically in English. So back to Jasmine. How can students familiarize themselves with academic writing in the United States?
Well, developing our writing often involves reading work from others. So as students, they'll definitely get the opportunity to read for class. Asking instructors for model papers from their field can also be helpful. I know as a graduate student, I used to come across really interesting research articles and felt myself wanting more of that. And so I'd oftentimes look at their references, and that usually led me down a rabbit hole of really interesting scholars and experts in fields that I was interested in. So I encourage students to do the same.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. Like, I agree. There are definitely times when I want to expand my knowledge on something, and I do like go down those rabbit holes, and then it becomes even more interesting to me. And I think that is definitely like one way that I learn a lot, like, and that I can actually retain something, particularly when I find the topic to be highly interesting. I know sometimes in academia, not everything is interesting to everyone, and that can definitely be a struggle. But I do think there is something out there for everyone that they can enjoy.
And as an instructor, I know sometimes when we are teaching different format styles, it seems really nitpicky to talk about things like formatting your sources or crafting your works cited or your reference page. But it's a nice reminder that the reason we do those things and take those steps is so that other writers and people interested in the field can come across these research texts.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point and like very well said. So now I'm going to move on to Chris, but I think like any of us could probably answer this question.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris specifically, why is it important for students to ask clarifying questions to their professors and peers, especially when they're about to come to the writing center or maybe even the tutoring center? Like, why should they know exactly what they need?
Mm-hmm. Well, for non-native speakers especially, sometimes it can be very difficult to properly understand what the assignment is asking for. So in like sort of cross-comparing with what your fellow students think or what your professor says, like if there's something that you're unclear, if you ask clarifying questions to your professor, you kind of avoid that issue. Additionally, by asking those extra questions, you can also get some additional like feedback or tips on how you could go about working on whatever assignment or writing project that it is. Did that answer?
Yeah, I think I think that was good, and I think like you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like You definitely need to ask any question to make sure that you understand the assignments that you're given by your professors, especially because I always think about it in the way like, if you have a question about something, I can almost guarantee someone else in that class has the same exact question, but maybe are too nervous to ask it themselves.
Yeah, I thought of this question as an instructor, and I often encourage my students who are mostly international students that it's really helpful and appropriate and encouraged to introduce themselves to their instructors, even through a quick email. So your instructors might not know, for example, this is your very first time in the United States, or I've had students who I meet them on the first day and they're like, I've been in the United States for 24 hours. So that's really helpful for me to know. Or maybe they don't know how long you've been studying English. I have students who've studied English in different countries since they were in kindergarten. And then I have students who have been studying English for 3 years. So that's all really helpful for me to know as their instructor and for any of their instructors to know. And as you mentioned, Shannon, they're likely not the only student in the class with a question. So whether you ask the question in class or through an email, that's helpful feedback for any instructor.
Yeah, I think that was, again, like very well said. You obviously know what you're talking about because you're an instructor and like you teach classes, and you are the one that these students definitely need to be asking clarifying questions to. And I really sincerely hope that they are. So we're going to move on to our next question. So, Ava, I don't want to get into like a hot AI debate in this episode. That will be something that we'll discuss at a later time. But with online tools like AI and like other writing like tools that you can use online like Grammarly, or like you can even find essays online that you could like try to take ideas from. What is your advice to students to utilize like online tools wisely and safely, and not as a way to replace their own writing? Because obviously, as you know, doing that will affect critical thinking skills and will leave them lacking.
That's a tough question, especially with the growing popularity and like the usage of AI in writing. It's definitely very tempting, but I guess I can relate it back to my own writing. I mean, what I like to do is I just look at the prompt, or I look at the topic that I'm supposed to be writing about, and then I'll just dump all of my ideas out onto a piece of paper. And then the most that I would ever use AI for my writing is in like the very, very early pre-writing stages if I need help organizing the paper. But as far as like generating content to add into the paper, I wouldn't do that because I don't want to necessarily like fabricate my own ideas. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I don't want to take my authentic voice out of my writing because then it's not really my writing. And so I try to remind students that have thought about using AI or have been actively using AI to help them with their paper, like your professor or whoever you're writing to wants to hear what you have to say and what your thoughts are. And I also try to tell them that there's no right or wrong answers in your writing. It's just a way to express your ideas, and you should express them how they come to you naturally. And if you're using AI, it's just going to take your ideas and turn it into something else. And I discourage it, but I do understand how it feels to be stuck, especially like in the process of writing. If you get to a writer's block, like that's really difficult to overcome. But I think that talking it over with someone else, or going to the writing center, or meeting with a tutor, or even just talking to a friend about it is going to be much more valuable and a lot more helpful than going to use an AI site to help you get through that and organize the rest of your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think it can be particularly challenging for students who might speak multiple languages because they might have an internalized fear that the way that they write in English won't be good enough. And I can completely understand that. But again, that is what the Writing Center is for. We are so happy to, support anyone who needs like that extra push to get their ideas out. And I also highly encourage talking with your professor, like Jasmine was saying before. I can guarantee that a lot of the English professors here at Lewis will be extremely helpful to you, no matter what level of writing you're at. And they're definitely willing to like meet with you however much you need. Do you have anything to add, Jasmine?
Yeah, I always encourage students to use caution with using tools like online translators, for example. For multilingual writers, particularly, an online translator might be helpful when a student is searching for a particular word that's used in the context that they need it for that they might be unfamiliar with. But when we're looking at translators for longer bits of text, these tools can often produce writing that comes out a bit clunky. The languages have underlying structures, and the tools aren't super sophisticated in translating using the underlying structures all the time. So I just remind students to remember their goal and their purpose. And if the goal and the purpose is to become more proficient in English and to develop their writing, then we know that online translators aren't going to help them sharpen those skills.
I also just want to add on to that really quick because I have worked with students who have used an online translator to go from their native language to English just because they don't really know what else to do. But I think that if a student has to write in their native language, or that's how they prefer to write a paper, and then they have to translate it into English for their professor, as long as you tell your professor that's what you did, like, hey, I wrote in my native language, I know that it might not be a perfect translation, but this is what I did, I guarantee that it's probably not going to be an issue with the instructor. And Jasmine, you can add on to that if you've ever experienced anything like that. But I think that is something that the professors would understand, and maybe you've encouraged students or international students to write in their native language if that's how they think and how they normally write. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Early on in the language learning process, we tend to kind of think in our first language while trying to write in our second language, if that makes sense. So I just encourage students to kind of push through that, see what you craft, and then that is a good opportunity to work with someone like a Writing Center mentor so that they can offer feedback on any patterns that we're noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we use translators, that can just feel like, oh, this is how I wanted it to be read by my audience, but they might not be able to guarantee that themselves if they're using a translator. So I understand the temptation, but again, just remember the goal and the purpose. And there are lots of reasons why, students are here at Lewis, and I just encourage them to do the work that language learning often requires. And they've got lots of resources on campus to help them with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great point. And like, I couldn't agree more. I don't think I could have said it better myself or add anything that would make that better. So now we're going to move on to our next segment, and it's more like tutor-focused questions, but Jasmine, you can definitely still hop on some of these. So we're going to be talking about how we can create an inclusive writing space in the Writing Center. So Chris, firstly, what do tutors do to make sessions inclusive and non-judgmental?
Okay. Well, firstly, I think the main goal of the Writing Center is to be as inclusive as we possibly can, be inclusive and respectful, and just make sure that the writer knows that our goal here is to help them to be better writers. So essentially, we kind of say that when coming in, and we try and be, as welcoming as possible. I mean, we're not always going to say, it's like, hey, I want to be super inclusive towards you. we don't say that. But when they come in, we try and be welcoming and sort of lay out our thought process of like what we're going to do before we go through it with them. And we sort of like ask them, hey, does this sound good? Does this sound okay? And just depending on how they respond to that, we sort of craft our appointment around them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with every student, an appointment can definitely differ. And it's definitely goes off like a feeling kind of thing. Like if a student wants to have more of a friendly rapport, or if they just want you to like give them the advice and like that's it, like don't talk any more than necessary, and that's totally fine. But I think making sure that you do what is going to make the student most comfortable is what creates an inclusive and non-judgmental space. Because you don't want to ever pressure someone into being like overly friendly with you, or like have to talk to you in a way that like maybe they don't feel the most comfortable doing.
Yeah. I'll add that, at the Writing Center, we know that language learning and developing one's writing requires an incredible amount of effort and some vulnerability. And so we're happy to support.
Yeah, it does like require a lot of support. It definitely requires a lot of bravery. I would say like any student who comes to the Writing Center is particularly brave. Honestly, if I did not work at the Writing Center, I don't know that I would ever want to go there, just because I get intimidated easily. If I didn't know you guys, because I know you guys, you're all so wonderful, I would be there every day.
Yeah, once students come visit us, then they understand what we're all
Yes.
about, and then they revisit us. So we highly encourage, if you haven't been to the Writing Center yet, to check us out.
Okay, so Ava, how do we balance giving feedback while also respecting linguistic identities?
Oh my gosh. I'm getting some tough questions
I
today,
know, I
Shannon.
realized.
These are pretty
So
deep.
sorry.
No, that's all right.
I have a response if you need
Oh,
a
yeah.
second.
Yeah, go ahead. You can start for sure.
I'll say that we try to ground all of our feedback in the patterns that we identify. That's how we train our mentors. So if there are consistent patterns that we're noticing, that kind of, to Chris's point, that becomes central to our sessions. And this work can bring up really interesting differences between languages and language transfer. So, for example, if a rule or a structure is similar in both languages, then that can be helpful for the language learner, right? Because then they'll apply that rule or structure to the language that they're learning. But if the rule or the construction is different in their second language, then sometimes students have a harder time correctly applying the rule to their second language. So, for example, in the Polish language, they don't use definite or indefinite articles. So sometimes Polish speakers who are practicing English just forget to use articles. Other languages don't use plural noun forms. Really interesting. And so pointing out those differences as we come across them can be really helpful to students. Actually, there are languages that don't have words for numbers.
It is really interesting. I could not imagine knowing one language my whole life and then having to learn English, because I am aware that it's one of the most challenging languages to learn. Because there's so many words that mean different things, but they might be spelled like another word and sound exactly the same. And it's hard. It is hard.
Or languages that have that are feminine or masculine.
Right.
So when I took French in high school, you learn all these nouns, and then you also not only have to learn what that word is, but then is it masculine or feminine? And the same thing applies to Spanish. But I often get those things wrong.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. Okay, so Ava, do you have anything to add?
I feel like I have more of a question about Jasmine's response. So how do you come across those patterns, and how do you sort of bring up that conversation if you find something in their writing where it doesn't look right or it looks different than how we would do it in English? How do you sort of have that conversation and bring it up and sort of ask them, is this sort of writing structure or this pattern different in your language? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Well, oftentimes I spend time getting to know my students, especially at the beginning of the semester, so I know what languages they speak. Some of my students know 3 or 4 languages. I know where they learned English, how they learned English. Some have, like I said, they've studied English since they were in kindergarten. It was a required class. Others had to hire private tutors. Others learned from watching cartoons as kids. So having that background really helps. And similar to the work that we do at the Writing Center, I just really pay attention to patterns in their writing. I spend a lot of one-on-one time with my students in conferences, giving feedback. And so those patterns help me identify, okay, well, this just becomes something that we're going to learn about this semester, me and you. Doesn't mean that everyone in our class is going to be along for the same ride because they have different language backgrounds. They'll have their own things that we work on. And so it's definitely a mixed bag, but I think that's a helpful approach when the students in my class, they all speak different languages.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, like I have definitely worked with some multilingual students, and I notice a pattern, and it might be like a grammatical thing or a structure thing, and typically those are lower order concerns that we'll save for later. But when it comes to multilingual students, I do try to like prioritize those just a little bit, just so I can hopefully help them not fall into like continuous bad habits. And I'll just bring it up like I would any other student. I would say, oh, like here, like there's a dropped comma, or you need to have and here, like you forgot that word or something like that. And I would just talk them through it and explain why I'm telling them that. And then as we go through the rest of the paper, I might point it out 1 or 2 times if I see it again. And then if I keep seeing it and I've already pointed it out like 3 or 4 times, when we get to it again, I'll be like, do you see like what might be wrong like with this sentence, or like what you need to add? And in my experience, that typically helps. Like, obviously, I'm not an expert, but it can be pretty helpful to a lot of students that I've met with. Okay, so now I think Chris, Ava, and I, and Jasmine can all answer this question. So what does linguistic diversity mean to us as mentors and as students? So I will start us off. When I came to Lewis, I honestly wasn't expecting how diverse Lewis is. Like, I was not expecting that at all. But I do find it so interesting, and I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of multilingual students who can share their cultural experiences, and I find that to be so beautiful in a way, especially because I did not always find myself surrounded by such diversity growing up. And I just think it's like good experience to meet people from different linguistic backgrounds, while also having the opportunity to actually work with them like in the writing center or in the English department. And I just think like having that opportunity has made me like a better writer and a better future educator, and I find it all very beneficial. So, Chris, why don't you go next?
Okay. So for linguistic diversity, I mean, there's the obvious definition where you have multiple different languages in the same environment. But there's also like, and we sort of touched on this before, there's also like another aspect where you have different cultures and different thought processes that come with it. And being able to be exposed to all of that, like, and even if you know multiple languages, but you're not necessarily from that culture, you're inevitably, dipping your foot into it, so to speak. Like if you are like learning another language, so I think it's like sort of where like what you talked about, it sort of helps with like expanding your perspective by looking at how other people think. I hope I made that clear there. But.
I think you did. I think it was clear enough. All right. Ava.
So I want to relate it to what you were saying. I also had the same experience when I started at Lewis. It was sort of a pleasant surprise to see how diverse the student body is. And also Lewis, something about Lewis that I love is there are so many programs for international students and for bilingual students, just support groups and peer groups. And there's so many things that include or give bilingual students or international students a safe place, or that allow them to meet other international students and sort of build a community with themselves inside of our larger community at Lewis. So I feel like that's also a really beautiful thing, and I'm so happy that we have those programs because that is extremely important to sort of get them integrated into being in the US if they haven't been before, or just in a new environment with new people. And I think that I am very grateful that I've been able to work with so many international students because I've always been super interested in other cultures, and I think being bilingual, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I knew another language. So whenever I meet someone that speaks more than one language, I immediately appreciate them and how diverse their backgrounds are. So overall, for me, I'm really grateful to work at the Writing Center because I get to work with so many multilingual students, and I love hearing about their backgrounds and their cultures and their experiences and how it sort of translates into them being at Lewis or what it means to them. But yeah.
Yeah, well said. Okay, and finally, Jasmine.
Well, I graduated from Lewis as an English major, and I was lucky enough to have instructors who encouraged me to sort of draw from all of my language backgrounds. And I remember feeling really excited by being able to use some Spanish in some of my writing. And so I encourage my students to do the same. I remember also feeling really excited when I saw like Latino or Latina texts on my reading list for my class syllabi. And so as an instructor myself, I make sure to include really diverse voices in the readings that I have my students read. Overall, I will say that being multilingual gives us the ability to access really interesting intersections between language and culture and identity, and those intersections are worth investigating and celebrating.
Yeah, I think that was beautiful, Jasmine.
Thank you.
All right, so now we will move on to our next segment, and this is just a quick tips segment. So I'm talking one sentence.
Speed round.
So each mentor is going to share a tip for increasing confidence for multilingual writers. I will go first, and then Chris, Ava, and Jasmine. So my tip would be to just keep writing. Even if it's intimidating, just keep going.
All right, my tip would be, since it's only allowed to be one sentence, Lewis Online Writing Lab, multilingual writer resources.
My piece of advice is trust yourself and trust that you are capable.
And I'll say visit the Writing Center and schedule an English support appointment. You don't have to be working on a paper to schedule one of those appointments. You can just practice the skill of listening and speaking.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our final segment, everybody's favorite segment, the word of the week.
Yay.
Because Josh is not with us today, I will be providing the word. Shout out Josh, we miss you. My guests will try to guess the meaning of the word, and hopefully they will get it right. So this week, our word of the week is, and forgive me if I butcher this, nudistertian.
One word.
What?
Nudistertian. It's an adjective.
Can you spell it?
Can I see how it's spelled?
Yeah, I'll spell it. Nudiustertian.
Is this an English word?
I need to see that written.
It
Wait,
must have-
spell it one more time. I'll write it down.
Nudiustertian.
Nudiustertian.
And it is an adjective.
Nudoisterian.
Yeah.
Does
Not
it
nudist.
have German?
So would you like the etymology?
Sure.
It is from the Latin nudus tertius.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Nudist
That
tortillas.
was not much of a clue.
Nudiester.
I can use it in a sentence.
So it's an adjective. Okay, use it in a sentence.
I ordered the key online for $48 that nudiustertian morning and was not expecting it to arrive until the following week.
What? Wait. Say that again.
So
You ordered a key.
it's describing the morning.
Yeah, it's describing
Nudi-
the morning.
Oh, that's kind of like, you're kind of on the right track.
Okay.
Well, it's an adjective
Oh.
describing the morning, like
Wait.
an easy, something that's.
It's not necessarily morning.
Wait, what's
but
Okay. Well, she said easy.
What's the?
free.
Can you read the second half of that sentence again?
Like a slow morning?
I'd ordered the key online for $48 that nudiusterian morning and was not expecting it to arrive until the following week.
That nudisterin.
I think that'll be our guess. Like easy
Huh.
or slow.
Okay.
Is it like? Well,
Final guess?
I have one guess.
All right.
Is it like? No, I don't have a guess.
All right. So it means of or relating to the day before yesterday. So it means like it's basically just
What?
2 days ago.
What?
That is so
the,
strange.
So the sentence would be, I ordered the key online for
2 days
$48
ago.
2 days ago.
So it's like the opposite
Yeah.
of overmorning.
I found that very
Or
interesting. I
overmorning,
was like,
whatever
dang,
it's called.
it is like out of practice. Like people don't really use it.
I don't even know how to
obviously.
say that.
That reminds me, in Spanish, we often use the phrase hace 8 días, which means 8 days ago. But in English, we wouldn't say like exactly 8 days ago. We'd probably just say like last week.
Well, that's like old English, like a fortnight ago.
Yeah.
Fortnite.
All right. So, before we close today's episode, I want to remind our listeners that the Writing Center is here to support you. Whether English is your first, second, or fifth language, you can make an appointment by visiting My Lewis and clicking the WC Online tab under Advising and Academic Support. You can also visit our online writing lab by going to lewisu.edu/writing center. I also want to mention that we have some exciting and helpful events coming up this spring. Join us on March 4th during Common Hour, where we will be hosting an annotated bibliography workshop in the Writing Center. On March 25th, we will be having 2 opportunities for students to join us for our Intro to Advanced Graduate Writing workshop. The first opportunity will be from 12 to 1 in the Writing Center, and the second opportunity will be from 5 to 6 in the Writing Center, or you can join us virtually by clicking the link in the description below. These are great opportunities to expand your knowledge or brush up on a writing style you haven't done in a while. Everyone is welcome, and we would love to see you there. Thank you to Jasmine for joining me today, and to our listeners for tuning in. Remember, your words matter no matter where you come from or what language you started with. Keep writing, keep revising, and keep sharing your voice. This has been Go With The Flow. Until next time.